Coach's on Battle Line Podcast, and here for a very special Annex episode is none other than Gordon Chang, author of many books, but the next book upcoming early next month, the first of the month, October 1st, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. And I wanted to have you on because truly, Gordon, no one has been sounding the alarm for decades about Chinese influence on American politics more than you. You're the guy who's done it.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, there have been many people who have been doing this. And the reason is that China's penetration of the American political system has been extremely thorough. So it's attracted people's attention across the country. And now we are seeing, for instance, with the Linda Sun prosecution in New York and others, just how much China has been able to control outcomes in our political system.
Absolutely. And I want to make sure we get into the article and then I'll get your take on everything. So to catch everybody up to speed, this is from the Associated Press. A former aide to two New York governors, which is the current governor, Kathy Hochul, and the former governor, Cuomo, was charged Tuesday with acting as an illegal agent of the Chinese government who used her state positions to subtly advance Beijing's agenda in exchange for financial benefits worth millions of dollars. Linda Sun, who held numerous posts in New York state government, including Deputy Chief of Staff for Governor Kathy Hochul and Deputy Diversity Officer for former Governor Andrew Cuomo, was arrested Tuesday morning along with her husband, Chris Hu, at their $4 million home on Long Island. Federal prosecutors said Sun, at the request of Chinese officials, blocked representatives of the Taiwanese government from having access to the governor's office and shaped New York governmental messaging to align with the priorities of the Chinese government, among other things. So in return, her husband got help for his business activities in China, a financial boost that prosecutors said allowed the couple to buy their multi-million-dollar property in Manhasset, New York, a condominium in Hawaii for $1.9 million, and luxury cars, including a 2024 Ferrari, the indictment said. I'm not going to read the whole article, but when I saw that she had this home in Manhasset, that's where I'm from. My mom is a real estate agent in Manhasset and, the North Shore. She sells a lot of luxury homes. And immediately she's like, yep, I know where this is. And it's right near where I went to elementary school. So in addition to that, she also halted any talk of what's going on with the Uyghur Muslims in China. So the last thing I'll read here is that she argued with Hochul's speechwriter over a draft because the speechwriter insisted on mentioning the Uyghur situation in China. And then she promised that she wouldn't let that happen. And then, of course, the final speech did not mention the Uyghur Muslims in China. For those who don't know, the Muslim population in China, who is essentially being put in concentration camps. So Taiwanese influence is blocked. This is blocked. And this is a very scary situation. And I think anybody who says that you've been fear mongering, this proves that everything you've been saying for decades is true.
Well, thank you so much, Ian. Both political parties have a China problem. They've both been infiltrated. But talking about Linda Sun, the Democratic Party in the state of New York has looked at Chinese Americans as a rich source of votes. Now, Chinese Americans in the state of New York, especially in the city of New York, have these extremely troubling ties to the Communist Party, especially its United Front Work Department, which is the part of the party that tries to subvert other governments. So the Linda Sun incident was virtually inevitable. And there are probably going to be other Linda Suns because of this connection between the Democratic Party, Chinese Americans, and the Communist Party. They fly the flag of the People's Republic of China, our enemy, in the city of New York. This was bound to happen.
How can that? I'm looking at all this, and Gordon, I'm just a dumb Army Ranger. I'm not a smart person, but seeing all these indicators, the money, the houses, it's obvious. How are we not pinpointing and going after these people? Because to me, it's like, and it's from all the stuff that you've done over the years. It's like when we used to find terrorists when I used to go overseas, when I was a global war on terror, we had the camps, we had them pinpointed, and then we just needed to action on them. You have all these people pinpointed. Why aren't we would call it actioning them, going and getting them, going and bringing them in, going and pinpointing them, or instead of just waiting for something like this to happen, which when you look at it, go, man, this is obvious. I know these people know we've got the government, people like yourself as well. We've got all these other people we can go after, but we're not doing it. Why? Why are we not doing it?
Well, that's a great question, Chris. So you must be pretty smart.
It's just from being around Ian a lot. Ian's a smart, but
No.
that's
Ian, of course, is
osmosis.
smart. We know that Ian is smart.
Thank you.
There are a lot of reasons for that. And part of it is because we've got very intelligent, well-educated, overeducated people in cities like New York and Washington who have had this idea that we need to engage the Chinese. And this is a policy that goes back 5 decades. Now, if you go back 5 decades during the Cold War, one could say it made sense. But after the Cold War, it certainly didn't. And especially didn't make sense as we have seen China move in very troubling directions. There has not been this change in policy. So you see the Biden administration, they believe that they can compete with China, but they also will not call it an adversary. And they certainly won't call the Chinese what the Chinese call us, which is enemy.
Enemy, yeah.
You know, we are Americans. So in general, whether we're Republicans or Democrats, liberals or conservatives, we believe we are entitled to ignore what our enemies say about us. We ignored Osama bin Laden, even after he killed 6 people in the World Trade Center in 1993 with the bombing of the North Tower. We did not pay attention until one day when Osama bin Laden killed 2,977 Americans. And then there was the Great War on Terror, which you fought in. China is much more powerful than Al-Qaeda or Osama bin Laden ever were or ever could be. And so the toll of our repeating the same mistake will undoubtedly far exceed what we lost in the Great War on Terror.
And do you think that's, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but do you think that's World War III? Is that, because that is what China is capable of. That is what a power, and you're so right, that they're not AQI. They're so much 100 times stronger than AQI could ever be, Al-Qaeda could ever be. Is that what we're going to have to wait for then? We're going to have to wait for World War III, just like we waited for the towers to come down before we actually do something serious about it?
I don't think we're going to have to wait for World War III.
It's coming, God.
And this, for this reason, if we go back to the late 1930s, there were separate wars that eventually merged into what historians call World War II. Right now, we have China fighting proxy wars against us in Ukraine, in North Africa. Those are insurgencies that look like wars. And of course, in the Middle East, the October 7th war. And we have China provoking crises in the South China Sea against the Philippines at places like Sabina Shoal, Second Thomas Shoal, and other features in that contested body of water. I'm afraid that these merge into what historians will call the Third World War. China has a very different definition of war. They call it unrestricted warfare. And as a part of that unrestricted warfare campaign, China is killing 75,000 or so Americans each and every year by backing the fentanyl gangs. This is a project of the Communist Party. It's just not criminal. This is part of the Communist Party's plan to weaken and eventually destroy our country. So yes, we are at war. We are at war at the way the Chinese think about war. We're not defending ourselves. And so, although we're a far stronger society than China, we could very well lose our country because we are not protecting ourselves against unrelenting assaults that are eating away at our institutions, but also killing our brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, friends. This is horrible. This is inexplicable why we're not defending ourselves.
And that is American ego or American empathy. And I saw that downrange. Empathy got us in trouble just as much as our egos got us in trouble because our enemies would play off our empathy. And then our egos, like you said, we make us too proud. We don't think we can get attacked because we're powerful America until we finally get a massive attack. Is it both? And are we stuck? Because that's our culture. That is, we are egotistical Americans, but we are very empathetic Americans as well. What do we do?
Yeah. Before I say about what we can do, let me just mention and comment on some of your really important points there. And that is, look, we're a democracy. And as Tocqueville wrote in the 1800s, democracies are very slow to protect themselves. It's not just the American democracy, but it's
Although I
worse.
would just say a democratic republic, right? So we're not a pure democracy.
Yeah, but we've got a representative form of governance.
Yeah.
And to compound that, it is American arrogance, like we can't be attacked. But, we have let thousands of very suspicious individuals into our country across our southern and northern borders. And we have had at the same time weekly intrusions into our military facilities, testing us.
Yeah.
So we can see what's happening. And so the question is, well, your question, what can we do about it? We are going to have to take extraordinary steps to protect ourselves, steps that maybe right now are not politically acceptable, but they are necessary.
Yeah.
And that is to cut ties with the Communist Party. And the reason why I say that is because these ties have given incentives to people in our country, Americans and others, to be more loyal to the Communist Party than to the United States of America. So if we got to cut those incentives. Also, our law enforcement, FBI, local law enforcement, just being overwhelmed by the sheer size of China's assault on us. So we have to, when we cut those ties, we will at least make it possible for law enforcement to deal with what is left. So that means closing China's 4 consulates that remain. We just got reporting from the Washington Post that Chinese diplomats assigned to the Los Angeles and San Francisco consulates were fomenting violence on America's streets in November in San Francisco when Xi Jinping came to talk to President Biden. That's a violation of our sovereignty. Why those consulates remain open, to me, is just wrong. Those should have been closed immediately. And we know that the consulate in New York has been doing the same thing. So those are 3 consulates that should be shuttered immediately and the diplomats expelled. I mean, I can go on, but the point is, we need to sever our ties. I know people don't like to do that, but I think we don't have a choice if we want to remain free and sovereign.
I agree. I agree.
I'm glad that you mentioned the southern border because I feel like the mainstream media narrative of the southern border is, look, these are people just from Mexico, from South America, looking for a better life. That's the case for some people, but China is also exploiting that weakness. And if they're going to come into the country illegally, they're of course going to exploit that southern border.
And the northern border too. I mean, there's CNN reporting that, and it was just a small incident, that some Chinese nationals were detained trying to sneak into Maine. Now, the ominous part of this story is that there were Chinese nationals on our side of the border, obviously there by prearrangement to help them get in. If you want to live in America because you want to taste freedom, you turn yourself into Border Patrol because you get a debit card from New York City, among other things. If you're coming in and trying to evade capture, then obviously you're coming here for malicious motives. So yes, it's the southern border, but let's remember, we got a northern border too, and that border is porous, and the Canadian government can be very pro-China communist, as we've seen over the last 10 years.
That's just amazing, these things that we're doing and watching it. And you've been saying this forever. You have, and it always takes that final straw that breaks the camel's back, where a lot of people die or massive failures within our borders that go on, where people suffer, that we finally take action. And it's always been like that. And I hate to say it, looks like it's going that route again. I hope it doesn't. I really don't. And I'm too old. I'm 53. I'm broke. I'm too old to fight anymore. But I don't want my son to have to go through 10 years of a global war on terror that I spent overseas fighting because of our egos, because of our arrogance, because of our empathy, because we didn't hold people accountable. And by you saying shutting those places down, shutting those consulates down, shutting those embassies down, kicking out those diplomats, that's not mean. That's holding people accountable. That's what we need to be doing. So they stop doing things that are, I don't say un-American, illegal, first of all, but just completely subvert all of our American way of life. And I don't see that. I just cannot fathom why that is such an issue. How is that political correctness? It's not. It's defending ourselves. That's not political correctness.
Well, Chris, I got some bad news for you, because all Americans are going to have to fight. And we're going to have to fight on our own soil.
Yeah.
Because there are going to be attacks against our military bases. There's going to be attacks on civilian infrastructure. And we as Americans are going to have to defend our homes, because this will be the first time since the War of 1812 that Americans will be fighting a war, a sustained war, on their own soil. So it's each and every American. Yeah, we have a Second Amendment right, but we also now are having an obligation to bear arms to protect ourselves, our families, our loved ones, our communities. This is going to be an America that is unimaginable, something that maybe we could see in the movies like Red Dawn.
Right.
But this is coming. And this is coming unless we stop it. And we need a political leader. We need somebody in the Oval Office who will stop it.
Yeah,
Correct.
I want to make sure, since we have you on for a limited time, that we also get a chance to speak about when I called your wife Lydia, who's great also. I was unaware of this. She brought it up to me. I did not know about Tim Walz' decades of ties to China. I didn't know about the many trips that he took and that he was bringing American students there, which had to be approved by the Chinese Communist Party. Obviously, you found this very troubling.
Yeah, Tim Walz, in turn of the century, has taking high school students to China. Sounds benign, but this could not have been approved without the stamp of approval from the Communist Party's United Front Work Department. Tim Walz could sort of make the argument that will resonate with Americans, saying, "Oh, I was young and naive." Well, the problem is that the Daily Caller on August 27th posted an investigation that Tim Walz's ties to Communist Party United Front Work Department organizations while he was governor of Minnesota. So this is over the course of decades. And it's not like he just had a revelation. He still believes this. He's still talking about how great socialism is. Remember that comment saying that being a socialist is just like being a good neighbor? I'm sorry, but it's not. And so this is a deeply held views that have been held over the course of decades.
Did he receive it? And I'm just getting to follow that with Tim Walz. Did he receive money, funds, anything from China? Has there been word that has not been proven? That's just conjecture right now. It's just hearsay that maybe will eventually be proven, or is that not even been put out? Has there not been any word on that?
He has almost certainly received donations from Chinese Americans in Minnesota. The Daily Caller investigation mentions his connections with Chinese American organizations, which are known to be fronts for the Communist Party, including the Chinese American Association for Minnesota, CAM. And so we can assume that there's been money that has flown into his campaign coffers, because that's the reason why he was participating in some of these events. But there's much more in a very long investigation. And I understand the Daily Caller is going to have a second investigation, which is going to drop pretty soon, which will continue to detail these ties between him and front organizations.
Yeah, and I think if you look at all the issues with Minnesota, especially like that one district with Ilhan Omar, the amount of Somalian immigrants, there's a ton of ties there. And I know that people will say this one is conspiracy theory because you look at the pictures yourselves of when we changed the Minnesota flag to look more like the Somalia flag. It clearly does look more like it. I don't think it's coincidence.
Yeah, this is that's another issue. But it's the same general type where we have in our country groups that are not loyal to the United States and are working to overthrow it. And unfortunately, politicians, and it's not just Democrats, by the way, some of the most troublesome congressmen are actually conservative Republicans, like Patrick McHenry of North Carolina, who has single-handedly prevented the Republican congressman and President Biden from implementing rules to keep China out of our financial markets. But this cuts across our political system, and the American people have got to say, we don't care whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. We don't care whether you're a conservative or a liberal. If you are espousing positions that support the Communist Party, we will not vote for you, and we will make sure that you are investigated.
You know, back in the 80s, that was just common sense. I can't believe we're having this discussion that we have to tell people don't vote for those in there that support the Communist Party. Why we even need to say that, to me, is ridiculous. But here we are. And you're right on the money. I live in the Midwest. China's out here buying farmland left and right. And hey, we got you. I know we want limited time, but if you want to speak on that, because that hits close to home for me, because that's where I live. I'm in farm country, and that's going on right now.
We have Chinese nationals, and we talk about them buying land close to military facilities for surveillance or interference purposes. But we've also got to remember that in places like Oklahoma, states like Maine, you have a lot of illegal marijuana grows. You have the Chinese triads moving in. In Oklahoma, you have farmland being used to house human trafficking operations. This is wrong on every single level. No American can own a square inch of land in China. So why are we allowing dangerous elements to own land in our country? Farmland, ranch land. You know, if they want to buy a condo in Hawaii, I suppose I'm not that upset, but I do get really, really concerned about the heartland of our country.
Yeah, well said. I really appreciate you coming on. I know that you're slammed today. You have a lot going on, but I really couldn't think of a more important topic to bring you on for. And I've been meaning to have you on for a while. So to the audience, we've just scratched the surface. So please pick up Gordon's book, October 1st, pre-order. Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. He's got a ton of other great books out there, but that's the next one, at Gordon G. Chang on X. Really appreciate you taking the time. I know that, you know, you're usually doing Newsmax or Fox Business, and we're just a little podcast, but I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, sir.
I really appreciate it, Ian. And thank you so much, Chris. This has been, you've asked some really great questions. So Chris, in addition to Ian, you do really have to be quite intelligent.
Like I said, process of osmosis. We do enough of these interviews. People like yourself, it just finally absorbs in. It just took 250 episodes, but I'm finally absorbing all that intellectual acuity that all y'all have. But I do appreciate it. And being in the military, and we have a lot of military listeners, this is important to us. And you're exactly right. We don't want to fight again. We fought a war. We fought a long war, and we by any means want to fight again. But are all of us old hats or 50-year-old guys? If we have to pick it up and go, I guess we will, and we will, and we're pretty good at it, but we don't want to. But I'm with you, sir. I hope you're wrong, but if it happens, God bless whoever comes at us, because you've got a lot of pissed off veterans that know how to fight a war, and we will. But I don't want it to go to that route by any means. But I understand where you're coming from, and I can't say you're wrong. I can't.
In end of March, I went to Luke Air Force Base with Lydia, and we saw the Thunderbirds, and we were just amazed by the intricate flights. But what I will always take away from that is that beforehand they had an air show, and they had what they call the Heritage Formation, which was a P-51. On its left wing was an F-35. On its right wing was an A-10. And the announcer said that he was dedicating one of the flights across the flight line to the airmen who didn't return. And I could only think about the next war, which will be beyond our imagination, and the losses that we will take. So thank you for this opportunity.
Well, I appreciate your emotion. That means a lot to those of us that serve. Thank you, sir. God bless you, man.
Thank you.
And keep doing what you're doing, sir. Appreciate it. Keep sticking your neck out there, and we got you. We got your back, okay? Just know that.
Thank you.